Hello, everyone. Hopefully, I'm coming through loud and clear. Want to welcome you to today's open air conversation with artist Leonardo Benzant. Leonardo's practice is informed by his studies and initiations of the Congo and Yoruba origin. He deploys a wide variety of media and found objects to create work that connects African and Caribbean religion, art, history, culture, rituals, and modern art. He attended Pratt University in New York City, and he was awarded the Joan Mitchell Foundation grant for painters and sculptors and the Galveston Artist Residency in Texas. Benzant's work is included in several private and public collections, such as the Wedge Collection in Toronto, Canada, and the U.S. Embassy in the Republic of Chad. He recently completed his first solo exhibition at the Claire Oliver Gallery in New York, entitled Across Seven Ruins and Redemption's Somo Komorioka. Ladies and gentlemen, I welcome Leonardo Benzant to today's open air conversation. How are you?
Hi. Hey. How are you? I'm good.
I hope I'm coming in loud and clear.
Yes, I hear you clearly.
Okay, great, great. So, I know we had a lot of pre-production that just took place for today's conversation. So I want to just kind of get right into the flow of things so we can kind of, relax a bit and just kind of ease
Right.
into this conversation. So first of all, you're not coming to me from New York City right now. Can you tell us where you are?
No, no, not in New York at the moment. I've been staying in the Virgin Islands on the island of St. Croix.
Interesting, interesting. So, for those who are not familiar with you and the work that you do, maybe you could just kind of give me a brief overview of how you describe your art making process and the underpinnings of the work that you do.
Yeah, sure. So over a decade now, I've been primarily involved in a practice of making various bodies of work in the form of painting and also sculptures. Um, a lot of times, the bodies of work related to painting are inspired by ideographic writing systems and also inspired by oral history and various kinds of archetypes. And I've also been developing a body of work entitled Paraphernalia of the Urban Shaman, which is inspired by a lot of ritual objects and charms, and they also are informed by oral history and archetypes and ideographic writing systems. Um, Sometimes I make reference to a character, primarily associated with the beaded sculptures, because I kind of imagine the artist as a sort of urban shaman. And so in my solo exhibition, which you just mentioned at Claire Oliver Gallery, um, I sometimes refer to the urban shaman as Kamarioka, which means the chameleon. So it was a name. It's the name that was given to me in one of my initiations.
So you and I've known each other a long time and have on a number of projects over the years, and I think that if we've had a lot of great conversations about the sculptural work that you do, and obviously you've moved into other media. You're um, you haven't done seemingly you haven't done so much of the performative career lately, but you're also a performance artist. Can you talk a little bit about why so many different mediums?
Say that again, a little bit about why so many different mediums.
Yeah, why you choose to work on so many different mediums?
Yeah, I mean, in a large way, I think that my artistic vision and my experience lends itself to working in a myriad of forms because of the nature of the cultural, um, like the cultural, yeah, the cultures that I'm referencing. For example, in the ritual complex of the Congo, in Central Africa, there's always a multi-sensory experience when you enter a ceremony, and so you when you're in a ceremony, you encounter various media. So in other words, there's always a relationship between the visual. Say there might be drawings on the wall or on the ground. But those drawings, when they're being made, there's also singing. So you sing as you draw. You know what I mean? And then those
Right.
drawings are sitting in relationship to objects. So there's always like a kind of relationship between different disciplines that create a more holistic, uh, multi-dimensional experience in terms of the visual, the oral, the tactile, you know. And so all of that like multi-dimensionality informs um, the ways that I see different ways that I create as being connected by a particular cosmology.
One of the other things I wanted to talk about, and I think it relates to you specifically, and a few other artists that I know. There's so much about your work that is deeply spiritual, and I guess most artists could say that their work is personal. That's not necessarily new ground, but considering the deep spiritual underpinnings of your work, how have you felt about navigating the commercial aspects of the art world, which can be kind of tricky, right? And sort of the antithesis in some regards to
Yeah,
some of your belief systems. Has that been something you've
yeah.
spent some time thinking about at all?
I think that I think that as African descendants, we have a connection to a particular history, and while at the same time recognizing that we're also people that has been colonized, and also that we live in a Western context, and so like to me, it's just it, I'll put it like this: the from an African world, like the African world view, the way that I understand it, it's like the marketplace or the world that we exist in. It's all about an exchange, and the physical and the material are not necessarily contradictory to the spiritual. In other words, all of these things are different parts of one thing, so they don't necessarily, in my mind, uh, contradict. It's not like Western religion where there's this total dichotomy, like the God and the devil are totally separate, and they're totally in different spheres, you might say. But from an African centered perspective, it's the earth and the heavenly and the earthly and the sacred and the profane. They sort of meet at a certain kind of crossroads, you might say. So it to me it I just I just look at, for example, if I make a sale, that's just a manifestation of spiritual energy. You know what I mean? For me, the way that I look at it.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I totally dig that, and I think that it's something that is fertile ground for even more exploration about commerce and creativity, because I think even if your work wasn't necessarily connected to the things that you've described, many artists still sort of deal with this, I wouldn't call it contradiction, but deal with this complex relationship between the making of objects, the bearing of one's soul, and then the, sort of interaction with capitalism, right? In that regard. But I think you make a good point, as you just described that. Let's back up a bit and talk about your most recent solo exhibition. I know we have some images that we'll get to later in our conversation, but I've always found the titles of your works and your exhibitions to be very, very compelling, and sort of layered and layered and layered. It's like I hear the title of one of your shows and I got to go do research to figure out like what you're referring to. So let's go backwards in time. Let's start with the most recent show at Clear Oliver, the Across Seven Ruins show. State the title again, and can you explain where that comes from?
I believe the title is Across Seven Ruins and Redemptions, Somo Camarioca. With
Right.
that
That's
title, yeah, yeah, a lot of times my titles are not meant to be literal. They're sort of like another way of creating, and uh, it's like adding another note to my practice. Uh, and the title Across Seven Ruins and Redemptions is I was basically making reference to different transitions and endings that were going on in my life that I sort of was experiencing as what I would call ruins. And at the same time, it coincided with the ruins that were going on in the world, namely the pandemic, different racial, political, the killing of certain people. So I was kind of making parallels between different things that were going on in my personal life, just in terms of loss and things coming to an end. And then the redemption aspect is just how sometimes we make a choice between whether or not we're going to view something as an opportunity to grow and to tap into our inner strength, and sometimes the things that we lose force us to develop different conversations that lead to a reckoning, or a sort of you might say transformation. And um, and and the part of the title where I'm talking about Somo Camarioca, it's it's alluding to this idea of the ancestral and the collective, um, and also Camarioca is means chameleon, and I was kind of alluding to the idea of the way that uh, Black people as a collective, we've often used survival strategies of like kind of like a chameleon, just I was alluding to like this idea of the personal and also the collective, and the idea of micro and macro, the
got it.
relationship between
Um,
micro and macro.
I wanna ask some specific questions about work over the years, and I know that we and I'm going to go ahead and make the note to the wizards behind the scene that they should get the slideshow started in about 2 or 3 minutes. I do have a question that I want to ask you before we start talking about the image, and it's a bit more. There's an image there. You can bring it back. It's a bit more of a biographical question. So, can you share a little bit about your upbringing? When I hear the terms of Afro Dominican or things like that, I have an idea in my mind of what that means, and I'm sure others do as well. But can you talk a little bit about what it, like growing up and the different ethnic and cultural influences that obviously
Yeah.
shaped you as an artist?
Yeah. Well, I was born and raised in Brooklyn, New York, and my neighborhood was my neighborhood had a great diversity of different kinds of black people. So it's like black, as you know, is not just one thing. So you had black Panamanians, you had black Puerto Ricans, black Dominicans, you had black American, you had blacks from Trinidad or different parts of the Caribbean. And so the funny thing is that growing up, a lot of times Dominicans didn't really have a strong sense of a black identity, and oftentimes Dominicans have Haitian heritage, but they choose to omit that from their identity, you might say. So I, for various reasons, became aware of, you know, this notion that Dominicans are of African descent and that therefore we are black. And you know, I grew up around a lot of Dominicans that would say, "I ain't black, I'm Dominican." So it's just it's just a way that I understand that we're all basically we're all basically the same people, but we branched out. It's like we were all on the same ship, but basically some of us ended up in the Bahamas, or some of us ended up in Louisiana, New Orleans, some of us ended up in Puerto Rico, Cuba, whatever. You know what I mean? But a lot of Dominicans don't really, that I knew growing up, they didn't really have this notion of their identity as being something that was black. And so I would argue, a
Mm.
lot of them would be like, why you talking this black stuff? Why you? But I mean, it's in the culture. There's, yeah,
Now, I didn't mean to interrupt you. Please continue.
yeah, yeah. I mean, so that's just a part of my story. And I remember in high school, I used to roll with this kid called Lonnie Daniels, and him and I, we were. It's like we were discovering a lot of things in terms of political consciousness. We would read books together. Um, we came across, those books like What They Never Told You in History Class, Malcolm X Speaks. We used to just do a lot of reading and exchanging, information and things like that. Talk about different programs on WBAI, and we started growing our locks together then in high school. So this was all part of like my trajectory in terms of like developing, you might say, like this black consciousness as a Dominican, you know. And but then it's also in the music, it's in the culture. There's certain vocabulary terms that Hispanics, like Puerto Ricans, call okra gingambo. That's a Congo word. That's a word that comes from the Congo, which means okra. And there's just so many elements in Hispanic, quote unquote Hispanic Latinx culture that are black, that are Afro descended, especially the spirituality. It's like that's the area where you really see the strongest African features of the culture in the spirituality, and it's reflected in the music too. Even if the music is secular, a lot of it has its roots in the ceremonial music.
You mentioned New Orleans, and I'm glad you brought that up. I mean, you've spent some time there. And you also have spent time in Galveston during that residency. But speaking of New Orleans, I always felt like that's a place that reminds me of your work. This sort of like mix of different cultures and different ideologies around blackness. And I would love to kind of talk a little bit about those experiences that you've had traveling to different places, and how that has kind of made you think about your place in the world as an artist. But we have a work right now on the screen, so maybe we can put our attention toward this mixed media painting here. And if you could just share a little bit about this work, that would be fantastic.
Yes. So I made this piece in about 2014, and it was one of the last pieces of a series that began around 2010 that I call signatures. And I get the word signatures from what sometimes is called in Spanish firmas, which is firmas refer to different symbols and cosmograms that have Central African origin. Like you might like one popular cosmogram is called the Dikenga, and this historian Robert Farris Thompson talks about the Dikenga in a book called The Four Moments of the Sun. And the four moments of the sun in the Dikenga are basically the it's kind of like the journey of life, from death to maturation to death, and then kind of like your existence in the afterlife. It's like life to the afterlife, and just the continuity and the regeneration of life and death, and the so yeah, that painting I'm really pulling from this cosmogram, this idea of a Dikenga. Um, a lot of times the upper portion of the Dikenga, which is divided by a horizontal line called the Kalunga line, is represents the world of the living, and the lower portion that is below the horizontal line refers to the world of the ancestors. And the Dikenga is kind of one of those symbols that shows the connection between the past and the future, the living and the dead, the visible and the invisible, the spiritual and the material world. You
From a practical standpoint, when you approach making a work like this, are you planning this out, or is this all intuitive?
it's intuitive. Yeah, the way that I work is very intuitive, but it's also very researched. It's also like I I have a god brother who once told me we have to approach our own culture kind of like we're anthropologists of our own. It's like we're anthropologists of our own culture, and but the difference between an anthropologist and somebody who's actually involved in the culture is that you're not looking at it as an outsider. You're experiencing it as an insider, as an initiate, and that's kind of like a different point of view. So it's
Right.
kind of like you have the advantage to distance yourself and research it through books like an outsider, but then by being an initiate, you also experience it as an insider, and so you kind of conflate those two perspectives in your research, and then when I'm working, after, it just comes out very intuitive.
And so let's go on to the next image. And I know difficult to see, always difficult to see, images on a screen, and certainly details don't necessarily come through. But um,
Yeah.
can you talk about the process of making these objects, what that involves, and some of the materials you're using?
Sure. So this was an installation that I did years ago, maybe about 2014. And this is kind of like the first cycle slash iteration of this series that I began 2012 called Paraphernalia of the Urban Shaman, M5. And the M5 stands for these different words that begin with the letter M, like malongo, melanin, migration, modalities. Um, there's probably another one I'm forgetting, but yeah, the the inspiration behind this body of work came from looking at both jewelry, which from an African perspective, jewelry is not necessarily just a decorative thing, but it's actually uh, an art object or an object that has meaning in a personal way, but also cultural, historical. Jewelry can make reference to status, can make reference to gender, and different things. So, but yeah, I was looking at a lot of different ritual objects as well, and so particularly um, in voodoo, you have like paquet Congo, which is sort of shaped in a very like phallic way, and they're usually charms that represent miniaturized worlds because they contain inside of them a little bit of different parts of the earth. Like for example, you might get a little bit of dirt from the, the the crossroads, or you might get a little bit of sand from the ocean, or you might get a stone from the top of a hill, or you might get, in other words, you gather all of these different ingredients and you bring them together in a charm to create to metaphorically make reference to the idea that this charm that you're making represents a miniaturized world. And through this ritual object, the ritual expert is believed to be able to manipulate the forces of the world because of the ritual activation of these different ingredients in the charm. And so in these particular objects, I was putting different things inside of them uh, that were personal, but also things that I had learned that you do in ritual, different plants that are sacred, different sometimes coins. Sometimes I would insert affirmations and prayers. So a lot of my process involves a kind of like thinking of the objects that I'm creating as a sort of it's like it's alchemical and transformative and healing, and it's like a way of bringing ritualized power into the work.
Thanks for sharing that. Next image, and I'm excited to share this image because if I'm not mistaken, these are works you made while you were in Galveston, Texas,
Yeah,
and
yeah. This
the scale is not easy to see, obviously, because there's no reference point. But when you talk about these works, can you also talk about their scale and why that's relevant?
Yeah, sure. So these works, I have pictures standing next to these works, and they are like I'm 6 feet tall. They like they dwarf me. They're pretty tall, so you don't really get the sense of scale in the picture. But these each of these pieces are about 10 feet, 11 feet, 12 feet, something like that.
Right.
And I wanted to evoke their sense of being larger than life because they're inspired by different archetypal characters or entities. For example, on the far left, that's called La Redentora, which in Spanish means the Redeemer. And that was inspired by a story that my parents shared with me of this black woman in Dominican Republic who was part of the like the Afro Dominican ritual there. She's a drummer and a singer, and you know they just would tell me all these stories about her, that in an abstract way I was creating like a totem for her. Like these works are like totems. They're very totemic and archetypal in an abstract way that at the same time you could kind of get a sense that they're also figurative. Um, there's another
Right.
character. The two characters on the right, one of them is called El Cimarrón, and the one on the far left is called the Maroon. And I was inspired by just the idea that a lot of the spirituality that we practice from just these African traditions that we practice, a lot of them were kept alive by the runaway slaves, the Maroons who were rebellious. So a lot of times people overlook the fact that black spirituality is interconnected with a spirit of resistance, and that actually it was the voodoo rites that inspired the Haitian Revolution. You know, so it's like it's not this like Zen, oh everything is peaceful kind of spirituality. There are different temperaments in African spirituality. There's a cool aspect, but there's also a very fiery, violent aspect. And there's like a duality to the spirituality.
Right. Absolutely. Um, can we advance to the next image? So this is great because this gives us an opportunity to look at your work in the context of an exhibition in a museum. And if you could share some details about this piece and also where this image was taken, that'd be great.
Yeah, I believe this is an installation at MIA, Minneapolis Institute of Art. They had acquired my work. Um, it seems like you what came off the screen. Are you there? Oh yeah, yeah. I can't hear you.
I'm
I
still
can't hear
here.
you.
I had to turn off one of
Oh,
my lights. Apparently, the fuse was doing something wild, and I'm sitting here thinking to myself, I know this is live, and it would be crazy for me to have a fire happen in the middle of our
it's,
conversation. So I was like, you know what? It's better I just go and turn this light off than all of a sudden I have smoke and flames in the room. You too hot, brother. You too hot.
that's right. That's right. Wow.
You channeling something that was about to turn my lights off. Anyway, continue, and I apologize for that.
No, no problem. Yeah, what I was saying is that this is an installation at MIA, the Minneapolis Institute of Art. They had acquired the sculpture in the center, and they had placed it in context of these other two sculptures that you see in the background. Which the one on the far left, I'm pretty sure is it's an Egungun masquerade. Um, So it's like a costume in a tradition in Nigeria that the Yoruba practice as a way to commemorate their ancestors. And it's so interesting that they contextualize my sculpture with these sculptures because this particular sculpture and my work at large is inspired by this ancestral link. And this piece in particular is called "Radiations of the Midnight Walker," and I was I was thinking about um, first of all, this piece is like a mannequin that I had transfigured, and as you can see, like I decapitated it, and I just like to take uh, what I sometimes refer to as European material culture, and I like to transfigure it. I like to transform it, and it's a metaphoric reference to the way that a lot of times black people we take things that are we take things and we transform them and we give them our own meaning a lot of times. Like one historical example of that is the way that black people took European instruments and they created their own music and jazz. It's like this really African aesthetic and philosophy in terms of like jazz modality, but the instruments themselves are not African. You know what I mean? They're not necessarily of African origin, and that's sort of like by using a white mannequin and transforming it and decapitating it and giving it these different like appendages and ritualizing the object, and it was like a way of Africanizing, you might say, or transforming the object.
We had a question come in, and I want to just throw it out there, even though we have more images to look at. The question is, please share with us how creating is a spiritual practice for you, and how does creating inform you spiritually, and vice versa.
It's it's spiritual for me because I think that God is. I mean, when you think of a God force, or when you think of God consciousness, that's like the highest conception of an artist. Big Bang Theory, um, the cosmos, the universe, the planets, the solar systems. It's it's like the creator. I think of. You can't hear me?
I'm back. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay. Well, these are the strange things that happen with technology. I just left and came back and seems to be fine now. So let's continue.
Yeah, yeah. Where were we?
Yeah. So how about this? Let's advance to the next image and we'll just pick it up like that didn't happen.
Right, right. Yeah.
So this is a work from your recent show, if I'm not mistaken. This is a piece from the recent exhibition in New York City.
No, no. This was from a group show at Clear Oliver Gallery called
Oh, okay.
Four Now. I think it is. It was a
Okay.
four-person show.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I recall
Yeah.
that.
This.
If you could speak to this, that would be great.
Yeah. This piece is titled that which that which weaves all of time together, and it's uh, this is another sculpture that's part of the paraphernalia of the Urban Shaman M5 series, and I was um, I think this was around the time when I first was starting to conceive of the group of works that I exhibited in my solo show. So this is all kind of part of, even though it wasn't included in, but this piece is part of um, that thinking about ruins and redemption. Um, and I was thinking about just how love is like a cosmic force behind creation, and how it connects everything. How I was just thinking about using, especially the way that I'm using nets in this piece. I'm thinking about the interconnection of different symbols, metaphors, ideas, and different experiences and different dimensions of that connect the past, the present, and the future. I was thinking about the connection of, between the past, present, and future, and between the sacred sphere of life and the spiritual sphere of life.
And again,
And
the details of
and this is
the details of the work aren't
yeah,
so
this is
easy to see
another
from a
piece.
distance, but if you can talk about the materials, that would be great.
Yeah, these yeah this work is the structure. That's the first part of the work is really very labor intensive, and it involves creating these tubular forms that become part of the understructure of the sculptures, and it's almost like I'm rolling big cigars out of fabric. You know, there's a lot of rolling involved, and sewing and connecting all of the parts by sewing, and then there's like the part of the process where I string the beads, and then I just start to assemble where everything goes. I start to arrange it. It's almost I'm thinking about music a lot of times when I'm thinking about the different patterns as almost like the patterns are a visual representation of music. And
Can you talk about that a bit more? That's very interesting. The relationship between your work and music.
yeah, like I was speaking about earlier, how when you're in a particular ceremony, like a Congo derived ceremony, where they're drawing they're drawing ideographic ideography, basically. There's anytime you're drawing, you're also singing. So there's there's a connection between the visual, the oral, the tactile, and the musical, and also how it all relates to oral history. And so a lot of my structures and my forms are inspired by different Congo cosmograms. And but the thing is that also the my work is polychromatic a lot of times, and a lot
Okay,
of times
so you're using okay, let's back up a little bit. You mentioned cosmograms, and then you said you just used the word polychromatic. So let's just for the uninformed,
yeah,
maybe you could define what some of these things are as well.
yeah. So when you mean like when I spoke about ideographic, yeah,
Right.
or
Yeah.
the polychromatic, yeah. So when I'm talking about ideographic writing, I'm referring to a Congo-derived system of signs that are not always something that are visually represented. Sometimes um, writing can take the form of movement and gestures, or writing
Mm.
could take the form of an object. In other words, or writing could take the form of different scarifications that you get when you get initiated on your skin, and a lot of times the signs are a way of invoking particular forces in nature, and also they're a way of manipulating those forces too. And so a lot of times the language that I'm speaking of, the ideographic writing system, is composed of circles and crosses and uh, lines going in particular directions, referring to the different directions of the wind and things like that. Um, Sometimes the what they're called firma. Sometimes they're actual names. They or they're actually, when seen in a combination, they kind of, it's almost like constructing a sentence, but it's a visual sentence. you might say. So what I was talking about in terms of polychromatic, meaning that I use layers of multiple colors, and the multiple colors a lot of times are, like I was saying earlier, a reference to music sometimes, but also a reference to, in Yoruba, different colors are seen in terms of temperature. You know what I mean? So like red is hot, and white might be a cool color, and so the colors sometimes are a connotation to the different temperaments of different gods or deities or things like that. But also the different colors that I'm using sometimes are a reference to the different colors of the different leaves that are used in a ceremony.
Thank you for sharing that. I think we have perhaps two or three more images. Let's advance to the next. And I'd ask you to share the same, not so much about the things you've already spoke to, but share the same details about this work, particularly the name of the piece, if you can recall, and anything else you'd like to share. We also had a question came in that asked, "Are you also a musician?" So, be curious to know about that.
Yeah. Let me just share the title of that piece is Reliquary for the Black Boy Who Sits at the Window Dreaming, in parentheses, a collection of conjurings and letters. And it's a long title. Um, I was just musing on how as a little boy I would sit at the window, and I think that I conceived of myself as an artist way before I picked up a brush or a pencil. I conceive of being an artist as something that kind of like starts originates in your imaginary, you might say, or like it's a certain perception that you have of the world, and 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 sitting at the window helped shape that perception. Sitting at the window looking at, you know junkies walk by, you know, nodding, or people going to work, or people having an argument, or lovers, kissing as they lean up against a tree. These are all the things that I used to observe and look at as a boy from the window with curiosity. And I think that all of these images started to shape the particular sensibility or perception that I have of reality. You know what I mean? And so in this piece, I was kind of alluding to that idea of how, you know, one's identity as an artist is something that it really begins in an internal place, where long before you like pick up a pencil, at least for me, it's like it's a concept that you have.
And to the
And
question about your being a musician or not,
well, I mean, I've dabbled with music. I sing. I played a little percussion, but I wouldn't say I'm a professional musician, But music is definitely a passion of mine, and when I'm involved in different ceremonies, there's always music. There's always drumming. There's always some form of singing. I mean, music is kind of a natural part of my life, I might say.
let's advance to the next image, and maybe I can get a heads up as to whether it's the last. And this is a detail of one of the works where we get an opportunity to look at some of the process of constructing these and the beads. I mean, you must have touched millions of beads in the course of making works over the past decade.
So what was
And
the
we have
question?
no. It was more of a statement. We have one more work after this. Let's advance to that next work, and then I have a couple of more questions before we end today's conversation.
Oh, okay, yeah, sure.
So this is a bit different than everything that we've seen up until this point. So this is more of a drawing or a painting. And how does this work into your process of practice? I mean, what made you arrive at work like this?
Yeah, I think that like for example in the other pieces that I was doing in around 2017, um, the works that I did when I was doing the Galveston artist residency, those works are part of a series called Afro Supernatural Entities and Archetypes. And though if you notice the format of those works are these long, narrow, abstract, figurative kind of visual vocabulary. And I'm kind of working through similar concepts in this painting. It's just that it's more figurative. They're also inspired by, you know, a sense of cosmology that runs throughout all of my work, including the sculptures, a connection to the oral history, um, family history. Um, the title of this piece is Lo Tigre y lo Muerto, which alludes to that. Well, in the title, I'm making reference to my own background and my own memories growing up in Bushwick and my own experiences when I was on a particularly self-destructive path. Um, I mean, to be more specific, you know, dealing with addiction and and then so Lo Tigre Lo Muerto is a reference to one's like spiritual guides or ancestors. So I'm kind of like bringing together the duality of life. It's like at certain points in life, you could be going down a destructive path, you know, but then that destructive path can lead you to a very creative and constructive path as well, you know. So it's like life balances itself out.
Right, absolutely, absolutely. We're down to the final couple of minutes. So before we run out of time, I'd love to just hear. This is a question I love asking people. Like, what are you looking forward to?
What am I looking forward to? In what
Just in
sense?
general
Like,
terms. Just in general terms, as an artist or as an individual, um, what's inspiring you for the future? What are you looking forward to?
I'm I'm looking forward to exploring more of the different characters that are part of this cosmology that is connected to the sculptures, but in more of a painterly format. But at the same time, continuing to develop the language of the sculptures as well. Um, so I mean, I've been working on a series of paintings because I mean that's just part of like my sensibility as well.
Right, right. Well, I'm looking forward to seeing what you do next. I want to thank you for taking time to talk with me today and to share all of these bits of insight and I would even say wisdom with everyone that tuned in. I'm going to just share some final words here before we end today's program. I want to thank everyone for joining us for this month's open air. It's always a pleasure discussing the journeys of incredible artists like Leonardo Benzant. The Gantt Center's goal is to provide programs that inform and inspire. The support of viewers like you always allows the Gantt Center to expand its reach and further develop programs like this open air. To learn more about the ways you can support the Gantt Center, please visit their website, ganttcenter.org/donate, Always be sure to click on the subscribe button below the screen to be updated on future virtual programs. We look forward to connecting with you again next month for an open air conversation with artist Alterance Gumby. That's taking place on Tuesday, September 13th, also at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. I want to thank Leonardo again for his generosity, and I want to thank you all for joining us and wishing everyone a good night.